Hey, it's Debbie back for another episode of Let's Talk Change. Before we jump in today, I just want to say thank you so much for submitting your questions into the Let's Talk Change series. And I want to let you know it's really interesting getting you the questions from all of you because I'm seeing so many multiples of the same question, which really tells me that, the questions that you have that you may think are silly or, hey, it's just me, it's really not. There are so many other people out there that have the same question, and sometimes they're afraid to ask it. So don't be afraid to put in the questions queue at the end of today's series. I'll give you the link to submit your question because I want to make sure that you have all of the information that you need to be able to implement a successful organizational change management plan. So let's take a look at today's question. This question is a good one because it has to do with what happens after the change. And it reads, my organization usually gets great results right after the change, but then it tanks. How can we sustain these results? And I see this happening more often than not because what happens is that the project team that was enlisted to manage the change, implement the change, plan the change, enact the change, they move on to the next project as soon as this one is done, as soon as the deployment is done. But it's really important to know that your change project doesn't end when the change is put into place. There are some things that you really need to consider as you move forward once the change itself is completed. A really good visual that you can paint for yourself about why this happens, why results seem to be really good up front and then drop way off shortly after a change, is thinking about New Year's resolutions. Right? We've all done them. We've all been there. January 1st, you write these really great lofty goals that you want to set out and achieve over the course of the year. And you're really motivated and you have all these good intentions and you're really doing well for the first month, maybe 2 months, but then what happens? You just fall back to your old habits, right? You go back to the old ways of being and doing, and the exercise goes out the window, other things take priority. Oh, the travel, well, I don't have enough money, I'll do it later. There's always excuses. So all of those resolutions that you set for yourself kind of fall by the wayside as the year progresses. And it's very similar to what happens in organizations where there's a lot of excitement and momentum right out of the gate, but then that excitement wanes and people just go back to their old habits and they go back to old ways of working that they feel more comfortable with. But there are some things that you can do to overcome that. So the first thing that you want to just know, right? Everyone does this. We all love that new shiny object, right? It's the new thing. It's the new fad diet. It's the new flavor of the month. It's the new restaurant that opened in town, and everyone's excited to go try it. But then what happens? You're like, if you don't really get it and you're not drawn back to it, you're just going to leave it behind. You'll try it once or twice, and then again, the results will fall way off. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that those ebbs and flows, right, kind of like a roller coaster, it goes up and down and up and down, those ebbs and flows that you may see. So if you get really great results out of the gate and then they drop way off, and then maybe a little bit later it picks back up a little bit and then it drops off again, and you're thinking, what is happening? A lot of those ebbs and flows are normal, and you really need to do this, and you really need to take time to normalize your change and normalize your goals. And what I mean by that is understanding, are there times of the year when usage or adoption or whatever the change is, the process that you're using may be a little bit lower, and that's simply normal. Here's a great example. I work with a lot of school systems, and they'll say, oh, in July and August, our technology usage goes way down. I'm like, yeah, it does, because no one's in school. Or organizations who say, usage of our technology went way down in December. And I'm like, because your company takes off for the month of December for holiday. So understand those ebbs and flows that are expected, and don't look at that as, oh my gosh, what's happening. Look at that as, okay, this is just the usage curve and adoption curve that's normalizing within our specific organization. So understand that those first 2 points are really critical as you're building out your user readiness and change plan. And then as you're getting started thinking, what can you do to keep that momentum moving forward. You have to make a valiant effort to build out activities that sustain user excitement, kind of keep building that momentum to really keep users coming back. Going back to that New Year's resolution, right? If someone had a champion in their corner, supporting them, encouraging them, working alongside them, you know what? They would be much more likely to keep with whatever those goals are that they set out to do. So build out some user engagement activities. It's really about maintaining visibility, right? Bringing back that new shiny object and keeping that excitement going. That could look like building out a champions program, having newsletters every month or every other month where you're showcasing success stories, or adding a new feature to the mix, or showing how a new process is really helping improve a colleague's workflow. There's so many different ways that you can bring in user excitement. Add a training class. There's so many different things that you can do. You have to decide what works best for your organization and how often. I recommend maybe once a month as you get more momentum, once a quarter, but you definitely need to do things to keep that momentum going once the change is out there across your organization. The other things you want to consider are enlisting some feedback loops. There's a direct correlation to how successful you are and the feedback loops within your organization. And what I mean by feedback loops are, how are you engaging with your end users? Users who feel like their voices are being heard, they feel like they're part of a conversation and they're part of the solution versus something just being pushed at them, are much more likely to both adapt initially and then adopt a change long term. So build out feedback loops. This could look like a survey you send out once a month, once a quarter. It could be focus groups. It's just a way for you to connect with your users so that they know that whatever the change that you pushed out that was important to you, you're recognizing that it's also important to them, and you want to get their insights about what's working, what's not, how can we help improve the experience for you. So just letting users know that they are supported through the process makes a big difference. And again, you can create a survey. It's super easy. Create a survey, send it out once a quarter, once a month, however frequent you want to do it. And then make sure, if you're going to do that, you actually take time to look at the results and communicate back to your users. And honestly, that feedback could drive some of the engagement activities that you look towards implementing. The other thing you want to do as you're getting started building out your change strategy to begin with, make sure you're defining realistic goals, right? Make sure they're SMART goals. Make sure they are truly representative of what you can achieve and in what time frame. And if you go above those goals right out of the gate, you've already had a plan for those goals long term because you've normalized it, right? So the purpose of SMART goals is to set really key milestones of what do we want to achieve up front and how do we want to sustain that going forward, and what's really realistic for our organization and how much effort we're going to put in to our readiness strategy. But make sure you have those goals, because honestly, I've had organizations that come back to me and say, we really weren't successful. And I said, well, what were you setting out to do? And they had no idea. They said, well, we really didn't set clear goals. So how do you know? You're only going to know if you're successful or not if you set clear goals. And I have a video coming up soon that will talk about best practices for setting goals when you're going through a change project. And a great thing to do if you're setting goals, which you should, always make sure that you have a risk and mitigation plan, right? So you have goal A, and then you have to think through, what if we don't achieve goal A? What if we fall short of this goal? What are we going to do about it? So this to me is one exercise. You have a goal, and then you have, what is the risk that this won't happen? And then what is your mitigation plan if it doesn't? This allows you to get right back on track. If you're measuring these goals and you're realizing we're not quite up to speed of where we want to be, having a mitigation plan already defined, make sure that you don't miss a step and that you can jump right back on track and pick up where you left off so that you get back in the cycle of meeting the goals that you set out to achieve. So one of the keys to getting back on track as part of your mitigation plan is understanding why adoption is low. And this is big because organizations make assumptions all the time. I work with a lot of IT pros that are doing technology deployments, and their initial reaction is such that, well, users, they just don't like technology. They're just difficult, or they push back, or they must have some technical issues. But they never take time to actually ask the users, why aren't you using this technology? What's holding you back? What can we do to support you? So this ties back to the feedback loop I talked about earlier. So as you can see, all of these activities really blend into one another. There's no one that's more important than the other one. They really all do need to work together. But if you're building out goals and a mitigation plan, make sure part of that mitigation is, let's talk to users. Let's figure out, where things are going wrong. Maybe it is a technical issue or a process issue. Maybe it's just education or training or support. So really take time to figure out what will drive users to kind of get their usage and adoption back on track. Okay, so what's working in your organization? What are you doing really well that's helping users maintain that excitement, and you're exceeding all the goals that you set out to achieve? Would love to hear what's working for you. I love learning from what other organizations are doing. So share your comments below. And if you're finding these videos helpful, please do like them, subscribe to this channel so that you really keep those new videos that are coming front and center. And as always, if you have a question that I can address for you, go ahead and submit your question at aka.my/question. Well, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time on Let's Talk Change.